Życzymy Państwu przyjemnej podróży.
Good morning. As I understand, we can start. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Beata Lubecka. I work in Radio Z, and I will introduce my colleagues. They are First League. Karolina Lewicka from TOK FM. Roman Imielski, Wyborcza newspaper, head director. Dominika Długosz, Newsweek.net. And Konrad Piasecki. We used to work in one company in RFFM in radio years ago. So we met up to summarize a year after election. It's not so round, we can say, because 15th of October decided that maybe we'll put it in other ways. It decided that opposition side won, but it was not formalized fully because, as we know, Law and Order Party wanted to keep ruling, and they held to the power as much as they could. But this date is a censorship in a way, since many people were so enthusiastic, full of hope. Those who wanted to take over power arose these hopes. We heard about 100 promises for 100 days of campaign, so electorate could expect more or not. We will try to answer this question. So, dear panelists, what we achieved and what we didn't manage to. Now we work in one company, sometimes in one building. We also sometimes work in one podcast. So many links between us, but let's start talking about the essence. I wanted to start with saying that a journalist is not for being excited. Slovacki was a big poet, but whether Tusk is a good politician, let's leave that to historians. After this year, I have a feeling of a lack of respect, political gravity, and I will explain myself why I think that. I believe that all who is interested in policy heard interview from Jarosław Kaczynski, who said what he would do if electorate would give back power to him. I risk in my article that saying that if PiS takes over the power, it would be PiS 3.0. It's a party that learns on their mistakes, and just like PiS 2.0 after 2015 was better in destruction of the state as PiS 1.0 in 2005-2007, I expect the progress when it comes to PiS 3.0 if it's to rule, keep ruling. That's why my accusation come from, for the lack of respect, seriousness from the coalition rule from 15th of October. It's my feeling that this threat feeling is not well recognized, or the reaction at this risk is not proper. I first of all think about these many arguments in the coalition, in the ruling coalition, arguments related to projects that are important for society, because you asked what is important, what were the expectations. During last days, two huge researchers were published. First is Przemysław Sadurski report and Sierakowski report, Hidden Crisis of Power, another research that also tests the social feelings. And both these researches show that people are disappointed that certain promises were not concluded. PSL again promises to present their own model for questions like abortion, partnerships, unions. We hear that after presidential change, something will change, but right now, parliamentary majority cannot find a compromise. Another things related to health insurance and the behavior of politicians who are not cooperating. So without a threat of law and order party return, it would be okay, but not in these conditions. So the question is, for ruling, do they think that populism can be defeated exclusively by the instruments of the populism? And that's a question to Polish democratic elites, but also the European elites, because recently also Olaf Scholz turned into these populist tools. I see this lack of respect, a lack of consideration about what can happen in 2027. I fundamentally disagree that discussion is a problem in coalition of 15th October. This discussion is an essence of policy. Before that, the policy was made only by an order and by a will of Jarosław Kaczyński. Of course, there were some arguments between other parties, Law and Order and Solidarna Polska, but there was not arguments about the laws. There were arguments about places in coalition, about companies, state-ruled companies, who takes more from the partition of power. And recently we heard a statement, I think from Andrzej Stankiewicz, that policy returned to Poland. And it's my feeling that this public debate is what we need. I can't understand why Polskie Stronnictwo Ludowe would not like to agree to partners' unions. But I understand that this debate in coalition can lead us to a moment when some form of this act is accepted. If some form is accepted, then there is a chance for broadening the content. I can add some ad vocem. Of course, discussion is important. Parliamentarism comes from French verb talk, discuss. I said about arguments, and my impression is that politicians act like they are in opera. They sing, I'm running, but they are still stand in the same place. They would not move even a step forward. I think that these arguments give an impression of chaos. They would not lead us to compromise when, after many months of discussion about health insurance, I hear from politicians from different sides that somewhere in the horizon there is some compromise. Politicians and policies is made to solve certain things behind the curtains. You might remember in 2005, when there was after peace coalition expected, but peace won, not civic platform. They didn't want to be a younger partner in this coalition. Kaczynski also felt powered. He didn't want to unite with civic platform. How they tried to work in front of TV cameras. This discussion were doomed to fail. It was building their own image, presenting their own position. I think that there is just no real policy that would look like meeting of leaders to discuss certain position, and then they come forward and announce it to people that we agreed as a subject of the coalition, so many subjects in the coalition. We accepted the act about partnerships. What kind of project it is if each party prepares their own version of this act, how that looks in eyes of electorate, just like with migration strategy that was discussed about, and I'm sure that there is this discussion. For me, it's not enough some parliamentary discussion. I believe that partnerships and other subjects should be proceeded with small steps, because right now abortion or partnerships require at least one small step to return to the legislation from years past, and adding even small new lines into the act would be an important step. But answering the question what we made, what we didn't make, going back to own courts and going back to what happened in freedom games in previous years, it was before 15th October last year, there was this opinion which was understood by everyone, that peace would not want to give away their power. They entrenched so much in this Holy Trinity trenches, but they are so determined and they are so afraid by the situation in which they would have to give away power, that something can happen, something that can influence the democratic process, even in case of victory, which was not certain at that moment, which can sustain this process. There was certain delay, yes, of course, but in the end they had to give away power. Of course, there was a delay. It was a sad spectacle without power, and it was something Jarosław Kaczyński fought against. We all saw it was a spectacle, but not an attempt to stay with power. The scenarios that were drawn years before were some territorial army on the streets, special forces somewhere on the streets. I'm not sure if this scenario was actually analyzed by anyone except of those who really wanted to stay at the power. But we must say that a year and 5 days back we were in completely different mental situation, and not many would expect peace to give away their power. So, but coalition was formed, and as results of the election showed, it was possible to drag it for a year until today in more or less unity. But of course that's a subject for discussion, how this unity looks like. But in my opinion it will be possible to drag this coalition unity until next period. Nothing connects better than power, or a fear what would happen if this party law and order, in this spiral of political emotion or strong steps that were made during these last years, we all can imagine how law and order party would treat constitution and all the acts of law. And that was also mentioned by Jarosław Kaczyński in the interview mentioned by Karolina. And I think that in 2 or 3 years, when we have an elections, we all will think how, in case of power change, power shift, the reality can look. I can say that because in coalitions we heard that they would keep repeating, you will be put to jail every time. These politicians would say, after what this party did to Zbigniew Ziobro, entering Donald Tusk's house in the crack of noon, will be something that we can expect. Rules, this can be a story, a terrible story. It can be a horror and drama. But Konrad, they did not give away power. Well, they did in a sense that they had to leave institutions of power. But what about prosecution? State Judicial Council, these institutions, well, these facts happened. It happened no matter how we discuss how hard it was. I would say that this power taking over was a semi-takeover. New new institutions, Supreme Court and other institutions, it's one thing, but there's also another mentality. I hear that in forces, in prosecution, those who were connected to previous camp of power, they look at the results. They see 30% of support for law and justice, that they can go back to power, so they started a survival mode. In prosecution, you can see from 9 deputies, 6 are from previous nomination. Bodnar nominated only 3.
I have an impression that the process of transferring the power is always long-lasting, and it takes months. Some time ago, they were in the independent institutions such as National Court Register. But if this is how we are appointing and national prosecutor, this is what it ends with. But at the end, I believe it's independent. Well, I understand, but still, someone is the head of it. Let me just say briefly 2 sentences. I want to tell you what doesn't work, in my opinion. What doesn't work is to build a story regarding what this government is heading towards. What's the main advantage besides for the fact that law and justice is no longer in power? So what I miss is to see around what the ministers are going to unite and around what they are going to work together. I like several stories. What the work of this government is going to be led by, because it seems to me that the one who sets the tone to the government is the prime minister, and he's the #1 person in the coalition, that after him for a long time there's nothing. And then sometime the prime minister comes up with an idea, 2040 Olympic championships, or maybe let's come back to some other projects, or maybe let's focus on immigration strategy. I know it's a style of his governing. It's like by theme. So I don't know whether finally Poland wants to fight for 2040 championships, or was it only a plan in September 2024? But in October 2024, we already changed our mind and we are thinking of something else. Immigration policy today. But 15th of October was to be a summary, but then it turned out, no, we will not be summarizing because there's nothing to summarize. So we are going to rather head towards, well, there would be something to summarize, but still, I believe that this is why they came up with an idea of immigration policy, because there was no good idea regarding how to show off achievements. So what I miss is what I've just mentioned, and also an ability to take decisions in controversial issues. So what you've mentioned a moment ago, there are moments when coalition members should gather and they should decide, okay, let's head towards partnership, and we are going to come up with the final way how we see an act, and let's push through a plan that we are going to decide on together. But maybe Prime Minister should do it. You said yourself that this is the #1 person. The Prime Minister said that the partnership partnerships are going to be a governmental project and not a party project. That's about the civil unions. Overall, journalists from radio are pretty good at what they are doing, but Konrad is from the TV. Well, even better. So I've been waiting calmly because I wanted to disagree with plenty of the things. You have the right to do so. Thank you. So I believe that fundamental issue was mentioned by Konrad, that they have managed to take over the government because plan of the law and justice was that it's never going to be taken over. This is about prosecutor's office, because many of those who are there are exchanged. There is a new prosecutor, and others can get a promotion at work. They can get a bonus. But many politicians stayed in many institutions. My theory is of a theory of a deep state, because in many institutions the law and justice politicians stayed. The key and well-known story that was described in my newspaper related to deep state is the immunity of parliamentary gathering to Marcin Romanowski. I don't know whether you remember, whether you have read this paper, this publication. We have a diplomatic facility by the Council of Europe, and it is in the rank of embassy. And when the lawyer of Romanowski has sent it, and then the parliamentary gathering of the Council of Europe confirmed his immunity. And after that, this diplomatic facility has sent it to the Council of Europe, not informing Polish government, only after the fact they did. This was a mistake of prosecutor's office. They should have been able to foresee it, that this immunity will be a problem. This is a very big gap. What was pushing the electorate last year with this historic turnout on the elections was to make sure that there would be responsibility taken out of certain behaviors. To me, what's very important as I am a person who is occupied with international affairs. We are conducting right now real hard international politics. And to me, Radosław Sikorski is one of the brightest point of the current government, because for the past 8 years, we didn't have any whatsoever in international politics. Maybe you remember Waszekowski, but this policy wasn't even existing. Right now, he is, of course, a great critic of this government and of Jarosław Kaczyński. So it is an experiment that didn't work out, indeed. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that Polish parliament is serious again. Of course, I agree that many symbolic issues that were symbolic to the electorate should the government should have one stand, and we should be testing Andrzej Duda, and he will remain a president until August, and we will not have any civil unions and etc. until he is there. But those acts should be ending up on his desk. So we are regaining seriousness, because being in conflict is something normal. It was obvious from the beginning it's not going to be easy. I call it a Polish Jamaica. Germans are calling their coalitions in such a way. It's a very weird Olaf Scholz current coalition right now. It's also suspicious. But let's remember what the parliament in Poland was for the last 8 years. There was nothing serious about it. The citizens who were viewing the sittings of the former Sejm, they couldn't even treat seriously the parliamentary members, the members of the parliament, the politicians, because of that trust to Sejm and to Senate is so dramatically low. And the public media, that's another topic. It's a huge achievement that it was regained. It was supposed to be covered with concrete and impossible to move. Please forgive me to interrupt you, but I believe that the way they took over is controversial. Yes, of course, it is controversial. Turning off the information channel, well, but right now they have taken care of Czabański, and they could have done it in December. Us, those who comment politics, were describing it already in December, that it can be done, that they can take over the Council of National Media. And via the Council of National Media, they could choose a new chair. But I want to remind you that the Council, by the opposition, was recognized as a non-constitutional body. But now they recognized it, so they could have done it back in December. They could have placed Czarzasty in there. The left recognizes the Council of National Media. They have 2 representatives there. Civic Coalition could have said, okay, Czarzasty has the experience, let's let him do it. Yes, I agree, certain things should have been done quicker. We remember what we have heard about the previous opposition before the elections, that they have drawers full of acts, and I don't see that. I don't see the drafts of the acts that they supposedly had in their drawers. So I don't see it. This is the same thing as Konrad said. We don't have a roadmap. We don't see where the government is heading towards. I want to mention 2 more things, though. First of all, we are constantly having electoral campaigns. As of 15th of October, we've had local government elections, then we have European Parliament elections, and soon we are about to have presidential elections. And this is the machine. This is what politics are about. We may not forget about it. This is a constant election campaign. So certain things are being left aside. So from the point of view of our country, it is a key who is going to be the president as of August. Okay, if you say it's a key, then let's take a look, because the research shows that those who chose the current government 15th of October last year drifted away from the politics because they are disappointed with lack of efficiency. So now a question is whether if they say, once again, we need you, and after the next elections, presidential elections, we are going to deliver. Will they be as motivated again, the electorate? Efficiency was changed by the law and justice. When they said we brought masks, they were completely useless, but there was a huge plane, there was a picture of a prime minister in front of the plane, and the story was that the state is managing. And the fact that 100,000 people died, but there is no story, there is no communication, there is no, well, the electorate doesn't see anymore what it is even about. And the civic platform conducted a research to check what their electorate is mostly motivated by. This is something we can see by research. So undelivered promises, fights within the coalition, and the issues that I hate to call them this way, but the view on the human rights, on the world. This is not a priority, but it is a symbol. I want to add one more thing to what Karolina said, that there is no such reflection that law and justice could come back to power, and I believe the current governing coalition is aware of the fact that law and justice is surprisingly strong. No one expected that 1 year after they lost elections they would be as strong. Law and justice is a very curious party. No one really knew what is going to be happening to it. There were different fractions, but after all, Jarosław Kaczyński is holding it in his hand. Who is surprised with that? Well, it is about the fact that law and justice, after 15th of October, had plenty of challenges. And should they have 25%, well, it's a surprise to me that the surveys show 30. So what Sierakowski and Sadura researched is a surprise to me. The Migration Pact, that right now is a European project. We've had the summit. There are plenty of things that many wanted to do it, but they were afraid to do it. The Finns were doing it, but many say that it is in line with the international contracts, with Polish constitution. But we have to remember they are speaking at the same time. Okay, so Konfederacja is taking voters away from law and justice. So are you going to be able to see that the ones who are speaking first are the ones that are more reliable? But coming back to Sadura and Sierakowski, what we observe when it comes to social policy is that Donald Tusk maintained everything that was given by law and justice, and even ensured implementation of 800+. And there are also new financial transfers, such as for grandmas. And this research of Sadura Sierakowski shows that it doesn't elevate the current government, but it's still in favor of the ones who began it in the first place, meaning law and justice. There are the ones who are recognized as the ones most honest in it. They were the first ones to say there is money for 500+, and everyone remembers Jacek Rostowski who was saying there is no money and there will be no money. But coming back to Sadura and Sierakowski and the research, because 500+ and the answers that Law and Justice gave it, and we remember who created this huge, very important program. From my point of view, I'm not criticizing it because it provided assistance to many families, that's for sure. This is mostly voters of Law and Justice, or the voters that are close to Law and Justice, because Confederation is not close to those topics. But as you said, we live in the world where populism is in an offensive, not only in our countries. So not measuring, not picking up on the topics which the populists were focusing on for the 2 decades. It was a huge mistake. For many reasons, we were not touching upon certain problems, and we have to do so. One of them is the key problem of migration. Europe, not Poland, has to defend its borders. So the problem of the mainstream policy is lack of solving problems. This is why we are beginning to solve it. Sometimes it's a controversial way to do so. And sometimes even contrary to what our voters wanted, because part of the voters were not in favor of the migration pact. Yes and no, yes and no.
Yeah, it's against the electorate, absolutely. And that's also interesting thing about Sierakowski's research and Sadura's research. Very anti-migrations is electorate of civic coalition. Yes, next to each other there is liberal abortion, civil union, but we don't want to have Ukrainians or others from Middle East. There's one another thing that we need to say about the beginning of this summarization of this year, since we are, no matter we are in the half of that, there was a paradigm change this year. Changed also one important thing, how paradigm of Polish policy changed. This paradigm of Polish politics was that ruling party is stealing and they will answer that for that. But it never happened. Maybe they did not steal so much, or there was no such determination in making them answer for that. Ziobro was answered under the Tribunal of State, and the Civic Platform and the Polish People's Party couldn't achieve that. We can discuss if it goes too slow or it's not going. It has to go in accordance with the law. Yes, of course, but this subject for some reason is freeze now, and it's not that what happened in these justice found the money that went to electoral campaign, money coming from state-owned companies. It was all slowly, but with one step forward, one step back, but it was all investigated. There were mistakes and commissions, like with Romanowski and his immunity, but it happens, and I think it will be a serious shift of the paradigm today in Polish policy and during next decades. Anyone who wants to get some public money for their own party's goals will have almost certainty that if the power is changed, he will have to answer for that, maybe put to jail. And in my opinion, that's something that in Polish policy that used to be unproductive and futile in this is an important shift. And there is still no National Electoral Commission decision. Marciniak is not organizing this sitting because there is no agreement for that. So that's a proof that they did not give away power. But first decision of National Court Register is already made. But that's a decision about donation, not subventions. It's a decision that says only about money for campaign from last year. Giving away money from last year's subventions. But when it comes to expenses, ongoing expenses, this matter was supposed to be also discussed. Money for last year's campaign had to reduce their funds for next couple of years. National Commission, Electoral Commission takes away a portion of this money. When we speak about settling electoral committee, what happened, and financial statement of the party, Law and Justice Party. The question is whether Law and Justice loses all the money from subventions and donations. Well, to have 25 millions or not, I would like to have 20 millions if I were to have a choice. Another thing, recently I spoke to a very high-positioned politician from Civic Platform. He said, don't believe that Law and Justice don't have money. They have money. They collected money for 8 years, not just... They also put their people in different positions. What happens in National Treasury, state-owned companies, they have their people people from law and justice in high positions in state-owned companies, and they will pay for law and justice. They still collect monies. Civic Platform have right now 3 million zlotys on their account, and they are supposed to do a campaign, run a campaign. It's impossible. They will take a loan, of course, but they will have to pay it back. And Law and Justice collected money for paying off the loan, and they collected something from their electorate, and it also was a move to consolidate their electorate. Another thing about Romanowski, I have a problem with prosecution, that many things are not run in the way they should go. Of course, we have a rule of law. It's not that someone from the ministry calls to the prosecution and says, I know that that and that was stealing, put him into jail. But I'm not sure if in Romanowski's case they could do that. It was the first case when they used an immunity from European Council. It was a mistake because there was no positive opinion that it cannot be treated so widely. I would probably send this motion to the European Council because we are dealing with Zbigniew Ziobro's people. So just in case, just like I read the document sent by Andrzej Duda, the important is if this process is running. Well, this mill is working, its grinds are turning. But when we talk about the responsibility, I think it's Kaczynski, Morawiecki, and Ziobro who should be held responsible. But they will not answer for that. They just changed position in plenary room from ruling to opposition side. They are criticizing government with grim faces. So their responsibility can be a kind of a fairy tale for children. I can disagree with that. The Mateusz Morawiecki's environment is so certain that they will be in jail. It's Kaczmarowski's case, state strategic resources. There were unbelievable scams there, and these scams happened in written order from Morawiecki, and that's why they tried to pilgrimage to London to get support in this case. They said you should not go back to Poland so fast and don't say too much. We know that family of Kaczmarowski would like to see him here because he has small children, and this is a problem for Mateusz Morawiecki's environment if Kaczmarowski starts to cooperate with prosecution, because indeed there were unbelievable scams, a lot of things we wrote about. But for me it was something amazing. We wrote one article about government trying to create a law and justice government. We wanted to create a huge place where you can rent rehab instruments, rehab tools. Yes, they wanted to spend 200 million for this kind of rentals center for rehabilitation, but where this money was spent, what was purchased, we don't know. So Dworczak, Bielan, and Morawiecki, unfortunately or fortunately, they are indeed afraid of what can happen, that these grinds of justice, they work slowly, but because of the procedures, what Adam Bodnar is also confirming. Also, Łukasz Mejza is right now in the crosshair. There is a convention about people with disabilities from 2012. And what happens next? There is a project of presidential act that's proceeded, but it would anyway be thrown to garbage because people with disabilities are not happy about this act because it was not well consulted and it's not answering the needs of people with disabilities. So this act, I believe, this kind of an assistant for every day can be more on their own. Also similar small steps that no one would brag about, increasing these benefits, grand mass. But this policy is, to put it mildly, weak. We don't even have a spokesperson. But is it a problem? No, it's not. Well, the thing is that a spokesman could also run some joint informational policy of their office. So we're going back to the matter of coalition. Well, Donald Tusk is a main spokesperson of this coalition through Twitter, through platform X. We remember who started with this mode of communication. It's Donald Trump. It's very convenient for politicians because there is no people in the middle in form of journalists. He can avoid being interviewed. He recently gave an interview to Wyborcza newspapers. On the conference, you might not be able to ask all possible questions. So it's quite populistic, I would say, that Prime Minister is not more available for journalists in order to talk about policy and answering difficult questions. I remember Pavel Krash, a spokesman of Donald Tusk, but he would not respond to text messages or calls. Previous spokesperson did not know anything. It was difficult to ask anything. Very sympathetic person, or Kidawa Blońska. I remember one anecdote from the time she was a spokesperson when Donald Tusk was singing Hey Jude, I think, sitting at the desk, and I called Miss Spokesperson and I asked, what happened? Why is he singing? She said, I'm sorry, when I was leaving my work, he was not singing. The problem is not about spokesperson. There are always problems with spokespersons, whether it's a president or a government spokesperson. There is a problem that this person would say something but might not be fully good. But the problem is lack of communicational strategy. I mean, who of you knows if in Poland the nuclear power plant is built or not? Well, I just know that something is built there. I met a person who is working on that during a Grand Prix match, during a game, and he told me about it. But the situation when Andrzej Duda comes to Sejm and he starts attacking, what's with the central communication port? What's with other infrastructural investments? And in my opinion, in eyes of public opinion, Andrzej Duda would get more sympathy from publicity than government, who would not answer these questions, which is a proof of lack of communicational strategy that in many areas allows things to happen on its own. But what happens with the act on wind generators? We hear that in a moment it will be consulted. So there's many weaknesses like that seem to be simple to overcome, but for some reason they are not removed. It's not only your impression, Konrad. I have the report in front of my eyes. Implementation of big investments like nuclear power plant on central communication port is a reason to be proud from Poland. So Law and Justice found some social emotion related to huge investments. We might, of course, think about whether this investment will pay off. Will we have any planes starting and landing there? But it turns out that there is a certain social emotion that is vivid and that has to be somehow responded to. Where Tusk tried to do something with that, keeping this project, central communication port, at life. There is an architectural project, and it is planned to be completed till the end of this year, the project. But we need to build nuclear power plant. Do we do that? Now you know that because you heard from that gentleman during that match you watched. The same things look like in the abortion matter. It was another problem from coalition, and Donald Tusk, he should, going to the parliamentary room, have some agreement to other parties of the coalition, Polish People's Party. Someone can stuck in an elevator, unstuckable elevator, but there are tricks how to do that. in a way to proceed this project. But the government did a lot in this regard. There are guidelines of the Ministry of Health. And I also know that accidentally, because I met Kwiatkowska, she told me about that, but there was a special team who worked on that, Ministry of Health. Just remember that it never went to a public opinion. No one treated seriously this thing. Only after this parliamentary problem, the team was created with some reasonable solutions that went to the desk of Ministry of Justice, then it was sent to prosecutions. And how prosecutors should not investigate people in abortion cases. But whether any common people know about that, it's a complicated and treated as an ersatz, as something, as an error, or something that we try to do, because we can't do a basic thing, because it would be not allowed by President Duda, but because we cannot find an agreement. But I will go back to the idea.
If I tell you it's 10:45, we are about to end indeed. We will allow for some room for questions and answers. So about the idea, we remember Donald Tusk from the time of the first government of the civic platform, and his rule was, if you have visions, then you should consult a doctor. But I believe that a lack of vision for the current government is pretty astonishing. I've prepared a quote which shows what is the least that we could reach. Katarzyna Kotula, I believe that we should put on the table at first the idea of sitting all together to the table and communicating in between the divisions to deal with all our internal tensions behind the closed door. This is the minimum of minimums, but let's begin with this one joint idea so that we can come up with a compromise in the projects which some in the coalition like and some others don't. It is that we can come up with a project that is closer to an identity of one political party and another that is closer to the identity of our interests or the voters' preferences of another political group. But if we, until the presidential elections, are going to keep on observing this type of tensions, I'm pretty sure that the electorate, the voters will not be as motivated to presidential elections, and the result of the elections would be very unsure to the very last second. There would be several candidates from the governing coalition. So there is going to be plenty of competition. So the tensions are all the time going to be there. Now we have the space for questions and answers from the audience. Rafał Kacprzyk speaking. I would like this discussion to be longer because we are getting to positive dimension, because the beginning was very dramatic. I was noting down pointers, chaos, quarreling, lack of reflection on the future, on what's going to happen in 2027. So we are complainers. Yes, I'm in the middle, in the circus called Parliament. It's for the first time that I'm there, and I see as an insider. This is why I would like to share with you several things. Free. Actually, I would like to ask you, each and single one of you, to mention three positives. So please show to the society, to the coalition, to the young people, to the women that voted, that attended, that indeed plenty of things are not working out, but a lot is. But we are not a PR of the government. It's not our job. Okay, I agree, but it's we have to show the voters that in vitro and the same is open. There are no longer the blockages at the entrance. I also disagree with the abortion statements of yours, because for the first time in 30 years, we have taken the second step. We are going to continue speaking about topics related to acts that allow abortion. For the first time, it went through the first reading, and it's something that's worth noting. But for how long can you only be talking? The voters are expecting certain actions, not just talking and reading. So talking about legislation is not enough. There should be certain projects coming through the same. It's not true that the first reading for the first time in 30 years, because plenty of civic projects were read for the first time, because that's what the custom was for quite some time. Right now, we have a very same situation than there was at the beginning of October last year. Abortion is allowed in Poland only in 2 cases, and nothing has changed in the matter, besides for the things that were mentioned by Roman. But I'm convinced that there are plenty of prosecutors and doctors who say, all right, an ordinance and guidelines is one thing, and then law and justice is going to come and put me in prison. So I am going to wait for the real act. Yes, in vitro worked out. We keep on forgetting about it. It's a very important issue. I'm lucky to have a 30-over-year-old sister who is a fruit of in vitro. So that's great. And plenty of people realistically has a chance to have children. What worked, in my opinion, is to organize legislation. I am a fan of legislation, of a good one. We don't have the influx of projects that were from the members of parliament. It was a nightmare of the time of the governance of law and justice, because everything was being placed in the same as parliamentary projects, and those didn't require any consultations, but the governmental ones require consultations, and this is when it takes so much time. But the consultations are an advantage. The third positive, oh my God, let me add, they started offending voters of the other side. There must be more of that. We've spoken about the television, the international politics, KPO, and etc. If not the fact that Andrzej Duda didn't want to appoint ambassadors. In many cases, so the National Reconstruction Plan was also an advantage. But if not Andrzej Duda, then indeed our international politics would be a bright point. Good morning, Iżel Michał speaking. I'm a lawyer in an School of Applicants. First of all, thank you for your vote in the discussion, voice in the discussion. I have 2 reflections I'd like to share with you before I ask a question. In my assessment, despite for lack of proper communication of the government with the society, I believe that during the 8 years, the communication was strong enough, because we had public media propaganda. There was not even one single bad word about the governing party. The society kept on obtaining information about success and the good things done by the government. This is why it seems that the communication shows us less of advantages right now. Another part in your discussion is that, in my assessment, Prime Minister Tusk today is a Machiavelli. So he is going to do everything to win presidential elections, and he will be taking ad hoc decisions. So we don't know, really, what will happen in several months. We don't know his strategy, because it's, in my assessment, not his plan to implement a certain plan by presidential elections, but rather the program is to win presidential elections. This is why we cannot predict anything else. Now, I want to share my reflections and my question. As a lawyer, I'm terrified that we have a horrible chaos when it comes to legal framework. I don't know what to say to my students, how to teach them, because we can read about the rule of law of the European Court. We can, but for 5% of lawyers and people interested in law, people do not know what is in line with law and when it's not. Why one decision of the court is recognized and another isn't. For instance, decisions of the rulings of the court, which are recognized by Hołownia, and some are not. So why doesn't he recognize of the ruling of the very same court when it comes to immunity? And whether it's justified or not, but for a lawyer who has been learning from the scratch constitutional legal framework, there is plenty of chaos, and I, to be honest, don't know how to solve it. To me, the only idea today is to change the constitution, but the paradox is that Law and Justice begins to speak about it. I don't hear it from the side of the governing party, and the Confederation spoke about it. Yeah, but I'm afraid how would they want to change the constitution? I believe that we are soon going to face the wall. If in a year the current party candidate is going to win presidential elections, it's not going to change as much. We still have the Constitution Tribunal. Constituency Tribune that is ruled by the Law and Justice. So the fact that the Constitutional Court is ruling in such a way doesn't change the fact that it exists. What can you tell me about it? Of course, we can only agree with you because we see the situation with the new judges. On one hand side, we do not recognize rulings of the Supreme Court in the case of Kornelu Kanbarski, and on the other hand side, the Venice Commission tells us that the solutions that we have suggested in the case of new judges shouldn't be done as they did. So the opinion of the Venice Commission is undermining the fact that the current governance is not recognizing the new judges. So winning presidential elections is a key in this context, because then it would be possible to push through the act related to the Constitutional Court. But the key still is the parliamentary elections in 2027, because if the Law and Justice comes back to power, then whatever will be achieved between 2025 and 2027 within the 2 years, it is going to be completely reversed as of Monday after the elections. But if we have the president, he will be able to veto. But I assure you that certain things can be taken over without cooperation with president. They will find a way to bring back the form of the justice they prefer. But what you said about presidential elections when you spoke about Machiavelli, Machiavellism is efficiency. If the current program of the government is to win presidential elections, then they have to do it somehow. So give something to the society, to the voters, so that the society would come to the black boxes again, ballot boxes again. Whatever happened is not sufficient, in my opinion. If in the next months to come, the current government would be only boxing, whatever that meant in Polish. So during the stand-up of Andrzej Duda in Sejm on the 15th of October, there is one thing I agreed with him. I was in Brussels back then. I was watching it from Brussels. Me too, and even in the same part that you agreed with. Overall, I was laughing harder and harder during his intervention, and I was ashamed. But one thing I must agree with, Andrzej Duda said one thing. You didn't win the presidential elections yet, and you can get lost in there, because indeed those elections can be tied. It's not going to be 70-30. It's going to be 51-30 to 49 or 52-48. We don't know who is even going to be the candidate of the coalition and of Law and Justice. Rafał Trzaskowski. You think so, but you wanted, well, I'm in favor of Sikorski, but I'm sure it's going to be Trzaskowski. 100%. Donald Tusk said it in the interview. He already disclosed during the convention. Tusk, Sikorski, and Trzaskowski. Of course, Trzaskowski is going to be the one. It's obvious. Maybe there will be a change in the White House or in another. Maybe that could change something, or something that would happen in Ukraine. But right now, it's Trzaskowski. And to me, a second candidate would be rather Tusk than Sikorski. But Tusk will not be a candidate. I don't think so. Neither do I. I've been saying it from the beginning, but everyone kept on convincing me I'm not right. So one more thing I don't like about the government is that the thing about the rule of law has been so complicated ever since that I really feel that they didn't have any idea how to cut it through, because we need a sword to cut through this knot that they've made when it comes to rule of law. But it should have been done already on the 16th of October. They should have had the sword in their hand and not after 10 months start to work on the beginnings of the design of the sword. Roman Giertych, that's my reply to you. He would be the sword. He would be the Macedonian Alexander. Well, that's what I feel was not right. If after the communistic times we didn't take accountable the judges in a very hard way, I wouldn't do it also now. So if after the Polish People's Republic we didn't manage, I wouldn't do it now. But the ministry will have to phase out of it. But one more thing I would like to mention. One more resentment I have to the government. They've signed the act about the social politics policy of the country, that there is this 800 plus and 13th and 14th pensions are enormous amounts of money spent from the budget. It's in total 400 billion Polish zlotys, and this means that 2/3 we are spending on such things which are in favor of Andrzej Duda. At one point, the ruling party, the ruling coalition, has to face the voters and have to say the condition of the budget is so bad that we cannot continue on spending money this way and give it away left and right, because in such a way the finances and the budget of the state is going to be doomed. But it is being done already. Last question from the audience.
I'm sorry to interrupt you in such a brutal way. I have a very important question. Yeah, it was 7 years ago at 5 p.m. Piotr Szczęsny burned himself, and in Moniuszko Park you can light a candle to commemorate how he set himself on fire. He directed the plane of his whole life into the central office of the system, and on the square of Soviet defilates, he set himself on fire like a kamikaze, not a suicider. Kamikaze can be awarded by monuments, not be condemned as a suicide. And these 15 points that were mentioned, points wrote by Szczęsny, and after the audition of a program Kawana Lava, I like this audition, but then a person there said it was not right, it was romanticizing this suicide. For me, Siwiec or Banach Square, those are some fundamental things that people know. And my question in the end, do you support this, as for me, failed position? Yes, because I believe that Jan Palach or Siwiec in '68 protested in completely different political situations in their fatherlands. It was situations without any solution. Tanks in Praga streets were something different than what Law and Justice made. Soviet system, yes, but their system failed after the political change. Their system was turned over. But can I disagree with you in this regard? That's the democracy. I believe that such a dramatic gesture, though not in such a dramatic situation, should not be raised to the rank of symbol, should not be affirmated, should not become a symbol, because I believe that behind it there are some ideas that we cannot say definitely. Was that a matter of depression? Was that well-thought matter? So I believe that in a democratic states where election can really change situation, setting yourself in fire is not a way to lead a debate, political debate. So that would be it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Jedzą kanapki z kawiorem.
Nadzwyczajna kasa.
Obrażanie dziennikarzy telewizji polskiej.
Chodzi o działania polityczne.
Przygotowanie ofiar dla pedofilów.
Für Deutschland.
TVP Info. Włącz się na nowo.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise.
Polskie Radio.
Jedynka.
Plany biznesowe powstają z marzeń. Dlatego nie ma dwóch takich samych firm. Jedni chcą działać na całym świecie. Innym cały świat mieści się w dłoni. Sukces biznesu to nie tylko jego wielkość, ale też szczęście, jakie przynosi ludziom. PKO Bank Polski.
Rodzina spółek Pelion to 12 000 osób pracujących w ponad 300 spółkach w Polsce, Szwecji, Wielkiej Brytanii i na Litwie. Jesteśmy liderem w branży ochrony zdrowia. Od 1990 roku dbamy o długość i jakość życia. Pracować z nami możesz w jednym z 7 obszarów.
Radość, nadzieja, życie, wyzwanie, pasja, pamięć, zaufanie, pokój, jedność. Słowa tworzą świat. Polskie Radio. Źródło wiarygodnych informacji.
Uwielbiam szycie w sieci. Wczoraj podszyłem się pod wnuczka, wieczorem uszyłem intrygę na apce randkowej, a dziś planuję grubymi nićmi szyte oszustwo z promocją. Tak się szyje.
Na oszustów są sposoby. Zapoznaj się z poradami ekspertów na niedajsiepodszyć.pl.
Dziś Nowy Jork, jutro Londyn. Za chwilę Paryż, Warszawa, Berlin. Na całym świecie kultura pulsuje rytmem. Wystarczy tylko włączyć dwójkę. Dwójka, Polskie Radio. Jesteś na miejscu.